We're not recordings. Welcome everyone to the Chenrezig. Can we welcome everyone to Buddha's Center? We'll have to welcome everyone to Buddha's Center. We just got the recording in progress, so let me start over. Let's get into a posture that is very intentional right now with our legs crossed. And in whatever comfortable position we can, even if we need to put our legs on the floor, let's make an aspiration to be able to eventually put our legs into the Vajra posture, the full lotus posture. But we do what we can right now, and we don't want to get stuck on our physical positioning. Because if we spend too much time on that, or we put ourselves into a position that's uncomfortable, then this doesn't really allow for us to work on our minds and work on kind of the processes that we need to at our level. So this is something that we can, set our aspirations towards, but not work on it as a sole focus at this point in time in terms of posture, because we have other things that we need to work on, and this posture becomes more and more important as we develop stages, and stages of just general concentration as well require this posture. So let's get into an intentional posture with our legs crossed, with our hands on our lap, right on left, with our thumbs touching, symbolizing the union of method and wisdom, with our spine very, very straight like a stack of coins, and our shoulders in a comfortable position that allow for our arms to bow out slightly. And then we have our head slightly tilted forward, with our eyes slightly open, focused on the tip of the nose, with our tongue just against the teeth on the roof of our mouth, and in our mouths in a comfortable position that allows for the flow of the saliva. And then let's now take some breaths. Let's breathe in and out through our nose in a very comfortable fashion, not breathing in too quickly, not breathing in so slowly that we feel as though we're gasping. And let's solely focus on the breath and try to get our minds to a more reasonable place that isn't attached to the things that we run after, that isn't pushing away the things that we find not attractive or unpleasant, in a very calm state of equanimity as far as meditation goes, that has just a very neutral state that we can then build our bodhicitta from, build our Mahayana practice from. So let's focus on the breath for a moment, breathing in and out, and then we'll go from there. So let's begin to think about the first noble truth, the superior truth of suffering. Start to think about what that means to us personally, thinking about the suffering of birth, aging, sickness, death, and think really personally about what those things mean to you. Think about sickness, think about aging, think about death. We just lost our Lama. We've lost many people in our lives. We know what that feels like. We know what that pain is. And we know that we'll have to experience it, because death will come and nothing can stop it. Life is always being subtracted from and never added to. We don't have a lot of time to practice. We don't know when we're going to die. There's more things that'll kill us than keep us alive. This body's really, really insignificant. Recognize that as many friends as we can gather, that moment of death, they can't help us. They can't take our place. They can't take our suffering away with their hands. They can't tell us something that will make us not die. Our material things can't help us at that point. All the money in the world won't buy a ticket out of death. Death is the great equalizer. All the material things that we have and that we accrue won't help us when we die. What could help us then? So we go back to the first of the Four Noble Truths and see that the Buddha stated that this is the superior truth of suffering. And we see that there are the 8 types of suffering, the 6 types of suffering, and the 3 types of suffering. And what the Buddha really, really intended by that statement was letting us focus on the pervasive compounded suffering, the suffering that plagues all beings in cyclic existence, that momentary change that's always taking place, being thrust into a new set of aggregates over and over and over again, shucking off old aggregates, old bodies over and over and over again. We've shucked off enough bodies that we could pile them and they'd be higher than Mount Everest. We've drank enough mother's milk to fill oceans. Yet we're still doing it. This suffering of being forced again and again and again into a set of contaminated aggregates beyond our control, being forced into hell realms, into hungry ghost realms, into animal realms, into human realms, demigods and gods realms, no matter what realm we're born into, whether it's the desire realm, the form, or the formless realm, we will have to experience this pervasive compounded suffering. This subtle type of suffering that plagues all beings who are not liberated. So what to do? What will we do about this? Will we continue to shuck off bodies, meet with the unpleasant, be separated from the pleasant, not get what we want, have this manifest suffering of suffering, headaches, sadness, pain, the suffering of change, finding that all of this contaminated phenomena that we grasp to, all the things that we find happiness in, have a self-destruct mechanism in them? Do we want to continue in that cycle, or would it be nice if we could stop it? So we think about how we would have to stop it, and it would be necessary for us to find out what causes it. And when we investigate what causes it, we find that a being who is an omniscient being has stated that it is our grasping at true establishment that makes us think funny, become attached and hate, and then act out through karma. And this causes us again and again and again to have this pervasive compounded suffering. And then this being explained very, very, very logically that there was a way out because of the nature of our mind, because of the nature of these things to be impermanent, that they could change, and that our mind was not in the nature of sullied, that our mind was just something that was clear and new, but needed to be matured and needed to be emptied of all that sullies it. So the being who directly experienced this truth and then taught it, explained to us that suffering could end. So then we move back to the meditation on death, and we see that friends can't help, Material things can't help. The only thing that can help is Dharma. Because it's independence upon the Dharma that we've practiced that we either, if we've practiced well, are born in the higher realms, are liberated and become Buddhas, or if we've practiced the opposite of Dharma throughout our life, we'll be born into the lower realms. And as Aryadeva's 400 verses says, most beings are involved in the ignoble and non-virtue, so most ordinary beings go to the lower realms of cyclic existence. So we know that nothing can help but Dharma, and we rejoice in the fact that we're here engaging in a solution right now. And then we start to think about other beings that we care about and understand that they have to undergo those sufferings as well. We think about how terrible it is that they have to endure these sufferings, and we're in this pit caught there with them. And so many of them have no refuge, have no truth to hear, have no protector. And we start to take a little bit of responsibility and say, what could I do for them? Because just like I want happiness, they want happiness. What could I do for them? And we start to understand our limitations. But the Buddha told us that we could become a Buddha because we have the same mind that Buddha Shakyamuni had before he was a Buddha, and Tara had before she was a Buddha. We have the same materials of mind that can be matured and converted into the same omniscient, loving state that they have. And if it's going to take a Buddha for us to rely upon to understand what the truth is, then it will take all sentient beings that same kind of being to rely upon. And until I become a Buddha, I'm not reliable. I'm not a perfect protector. I'm not omniscient. I don't know what those sentient beings truly need. I don't know what I truly need. I'm stuck in the same ditch that they are stuck in, as His Holiness says. They can't pull me out and I can't pull them out. A worldly God is stuck in the same ditch as I am. He or she can't pull me out. I can't pull them out. Only the Buddha can. But the good news is that we have all the tools necessary to become a Buddha. We have all of the steps necessary in front of us, all of the stages of the path to enlightenment that are necessary for us to be reliable, to be a real protector for sentient beings. So in order to be a real protector for sentient beings, we have to acquire wisdom and we have to develop infinite compassion. So how does one do that? How does that happen? Is it magic? No. We attend classes like this. We recite prayers like we will, and we meditate on and analyze the points that are made. And we slowly start to cure the chronic disease of grasping at true establishment and the self-cherishing attitude that saturates us and has since beginningless time. So it's for that reason just mentioned, those ideas just mentioned, becoming reliable, becoming a protector, becoming a Buddha, becoming a being whose mind is omniscient and cherishes others, that we're here this evening. and with that intention to become a Buddha for the sake of sentient beings, to hear the Dharma for the sake of sentient beings so that we may become a Buddha. Let's begin. The Sutra of the Heart of Transcendent Knowledge. Thus have I heard, once the Blessed One was dwelling in Rajagriha at Vulture Peak Mountain, together with a great gathering of the Sangha of monks and a great gathering of the Sangha of Bodhisattvas. At that time, the Blessed One entered the samadhi that expresses the Dharma called profound illumination, and at the same time, noble Avalokiteshvara, the Bodhisattva Mahasattva, while practicing the profound Prajnaparamita, saw in this way. He saw the five skandhas to be empty of nature. Then, through the power of the Buddha, Venerable Shariputra said to noble Avalokiteshvara, the Bodhisattva Mahasattva, how should a son or daughter of noble family train who wishes to practice the profound Prajnaparamita? Addressed in this way, noble Avalokiteshvara, the Bodhisattva Mahasattva, said to Venerable Shariputra, O Shariputra, a son or daughter of noble family who wishes to practice the profound Prajnaparamita should see in this way, seeing the five skandhas to be empty of nature. Form is emptiness, emptiness also is form, emptiness is no other than form, form is no other than emptiness. In the same way, feeling, perception, formation, and consciousness are emptiness. Thus, Shariputra, all dharmas are emptiness. There are no characteristics, there is no birth and no cessation. There is no impurity and no purity, there is no decrease and no increase. Therefore, Shariputra, in emptiness there is no form, no feeling, no perception, no formation, no consciousness, no eye, no ear, no nose, no tongue, no body, no mind, no appearance, no sound, no smell, no taste, no touch, no dharmas, no eye dhatu up to no mind dhatu, no dhatu of dharmas, no mind consciousness dhatu, no ignorance, no end of ignorance up to no old age and death, no end of old age and death, no suffering, no origin of suffering, no cessation of suffering, no path, no wisdom, no attainment, and no non-attainment. Therefore, Shariputra, since the bodhisattvas have no attainment, they abide by means of Prajnaparamita. Since there is no obscuration of mind, there is no fear. They transcend falsity and attain complete nirvana. All the Buddhas of the three times by means of Prajnaparamita fully awaken to unsurpassable, true, complete enlightenment. Therefore, the great mantra of Prajnaparamita, the mantra of great insight, the unsurpassed mantra, the unequaled mantra, the mantra that calms all suffering should be known as truth, since there is no deception. The Prajnaparamita mantra is said in this way. Teata om gate gate paragate parasangati bodhisoha. Thus Shariputra, the Bodhisattva Mahasattva, should train in the profound Prajnaparamita. Then the Blessed One arose from that samadhi and praised noble Avalokiteshvara, the Bodhisattva Mahasattva, saying, good, good, O son of noble family, thus it is, O son of noble family, thus it is. One should practice the profound Prajnaparamita just as you have taught, and all the Tathagatas will rejoice. When the Blessed One had said this, Venerable Shariputra and noble Avalokiteshvara, the Bodhisattva Mahasattva, that whole assembly in the world with its gods, humans, asuras, and Gandharvas, rejoiced and praised the words of the Blessed One. Ngala jebe ne jodamba ne gushe de chunga yi de do jen drupa bolama yi bushin si ne zongan rozo la shatse lo akasamara ta chandara samara yabe. Aga samara ta chandara samara vedi ata onga de kate parakate parasangati padiso baba kanjo sanji gai de me doje she obadoje me badoje shiva doje ragi vaje me de me jodanji she den goye zo ha girin dojo je she wadan me do ne ve jandan de wadan Namba Junjin Bunzun Zunjoji Dashi De Janden Da De Le Jo. The fundamental ground is scented with incense and strewn with flowers, adorned with Mount Meru, the four continents, the sun and the moon. I imagine this as a Buddha land and offer it. May all sentient beings enjoy this pure realm. Holy Lamas high, wrap the sky of your Dharma bodies in massive clouds of knowledge and love, and let them pour upon the earth of your disciples as we are ready, a shower of rain, the teachings deep and wide. ye zo la ma dam ba ye nan ye jo ga yen de yon zen ye je la zam be do ye le ma la za ye ju yi ya ba do zo. I send forth this jewel mandala to you, precious Guru. Idam Guru Rana Mandala Gamni Radayami. Okay, so we're going to do something a little different today. Normally, I recite the prayer of refuge in Bodhicitta 3 times in Tibetan. Today, we're going to recite it 3 times in English, but the way we'll do it is I'll recite one line, then you can recite it, then I'll recite the next line, kind of like a transmission. There's some, folks who don't have the prayer book in front of them. I've received this transmission many, many times, so it's appropriate to give the transmission. I received the transmission in Tibetan. Rinpoche said that any transmission that I was given in Tibetan, I could give the transmission in English of. So tonight I'm going to give the transmission of the Refuge in Bodhicitta prayer. In Tibetan, it's called the Jiantro prayer, it's considered Atisha's refuge prayer. Sometimes Drontompa's refuge prayer, and that's just what it's called. Trying to find the exact source sometimes is a little complicated, so there's talk about, is it Drontompa's prayer, is it Atisha's prayer, is it the sentiments of Atisha, but it's called Atisha's prayer of refuge in Bodhicitta, and I thought that we could, go through it in that manner, and maybe just look at it a little bit before we do that. So before we start reciting it, let's just look at what the lines say. So this is a Mahayana refuge prayer. So what does that mean? It means that you're going for refuge to become a Buddha for the sake of all sentient beings. So the foundation that you're starting from is that a Mahayana perspective, meaning that you want to become a Buddha, so therefore you're going for refuge. So then that makes it a Mahayana refuge, a great vehicle refuge. So what does this word refuge mean? So first we have to look at what makes us go for refuge. So refuge is like going for protection. So if it were a storm were to break out and all of a sudden it started raining and you ran and got under an awning, you would be seeking the awning's refuge from the rain. So likewise, as you go through various, levels of school, so, you're doing so for a certain purpose. So what's that certain purpose? So why are you running under an awning to get away from the rain? Because you're seeking some kind of happiness, some sort of, in this case, temporary happiness, right? Because you don't want to get wet. So you're happier under an awning because that protects you from the thing that's making you unhappy, which is the rain. So you go to school, your parents send you to school, and you get, you kind of have to go to school to a certain point, in the United States. But then you get into some of the higher learnings and trade schools and associate's degrees, bachelor's degrees, master's degrees, PhDs, all these different things that you can do, and the Buddhism, Geshe degrees, masters in Buddhism, and so forth. So you're doing all of these things in order to be happy. So you think, okay, I have to get this degree because I'm going to suffer. I won't be able to get a good job. So I'm taking refuge in this idea that if I do these certain things, I'll get this degree that will protect me from poverty in a way, that will protect me from the unhappiness of not being educated, et cetera, whatever that individual is seeking, the protection from, some sort of unhappiness that being is seeking protection from. So in both cases, these individuals are doing specific things, taking refuge in, taking protection in the educational system, taking protection in, an awning that keeps you from the rain. But these things that that you're being protected from, these kind of happinesses, these sufferings, right, are only kind of temporary solutions. If we look at the grander scheme of things in the Buddha Dharma. If we're looking for infinite happiness, if we're looking for the opportunity to not have one iota of suffering ever again, and if we're looking for the opportunity to be completely pure in terms of the afflictive obstructions and the obstructions to omniscience, then we're going to have to seek out some system that really, really, really works, and some protector that can show us somehow or another a way to be infinitely happy and to be free from all various types of fears of suffering. So if we want to be free, from fear of suffering, then we have to look at, how that could happen. How could that occur? How could that fear be subsided? And then when we start to look at the Buddhism, and we look at beginningless lives, and we look at cyclic existence, and we look at all of the different sufferings, and we look at all of the different opportunities for suffering, we'll see that that's a very, very complex system that's going to require a complex solution. So we start to seek out some sort of truth that's been presented that could alleviate our suffering altogether. If we're looking at intelligently getting rid of our suffering, it's intelligent to run under an awning, right? But think about if you're just trying to get rid of a little rain and you're willing to run under an awning. In this case, you're trying to get rid of every kind of suffering that could ever occur and the imprints of what makes every type of suffering ever occur. So you'd have to find something that would counteract the things that cause it to occur. And then when you start to investigate various systems and you start to look at different religious positions and philosophies, and you really, really analyze them with an open mind, if you are someone like myself, come to the determination through various studies, looking at what the presentations are, looking at cause and effect, looking at what the Buddha taught, looking at dependent origination, you come to find that the Buddha is someone who taught a way out of suffering altogether. The Buddha is someone who was able to, because he or she was like ourselves at one time, and then put a solution into place and it worked, they can tell us what that solution is in an unerring fashion. And we shouldn't just believe them because they said it. The Buddha said, you can check my solution with inference. You can analyze this stuff. First hear it, get it in your brain, what I've said, or read it, understand it to a degree, and then start to analyze it. And once you analyze it and come to a point where you can infer that it's correct yourself, then you know it's valid and you know it's something that you could follow. So by doing that and by using our own analysis and our own critical thinking, we arrive at the idea that the Buddha alone is the one who taught the source of freedom to the world. The Buddha has taught these very, very specific steps that allow us to become enlightened. So just like we're running under an awning in order to get away from rain, we're running to the Buddha for protection in order to get out of cyclic existence and in order to become omniscient. Because the Buddha is omniscient and out of cyclic existence. The Buddha is not in the ditch with us going like this, help. The Buddha's out of the ditch and can put the hand down and help. And it's only the Buddha who, in an ultimate fashion, because of the ultimate truth that the Buddha presented, that can do so. Because Buddha alone taught the Four Noble Truths, which showed us what suffering was, what caused it, that it could end, and how it would end. And how did the Buddha come to that? Through analysis of Buddhism, of what another being, a Buddha being, or an omniscient being said. The Buddha analyzed it and then was able to, through it maturing his or her continuum, get out of the ditch we're standing in. So, if there's this ditch no one else knows how to get out of but one person, you would seek their protection to get out of the ditch. So in really simple terms, it's finding a reliable person to pull you out of the ditch. And it wouldn't be someone who's in there with you, because they don't know how they got in there or how to get out themselves. It's a really, really tall walls. I mean, maybe they could, try to hoist you up or something, or temporarily make you feel happy. But really, in order to get out of the ditch altogether, you have to get rid of all of the causes that directly cause you to be in there. They have to be gotten rid of. If there's one left, it'll cause another ditch. And the Buddha is the only one who's taught all the causes for us getting out. And the way that the Buddha puts his or her hand in the ditch to pull us out, the ditch of cyclic existence, the prison of samsara, is by telling us what we need to do to get out. So the Buddha extends a hand, but then says, okay, you have to grab it here, pull it here, and then this, and hoist yourself out. And, finally, you'll get to the level where you'll have a little footing, and then you'll be out of the ditch yourself, and then you can help the rest of the people who are in it. Then you can help. You'll have the key to the prison door to start opening the doors so that those beings can climb the rope also, or climb the Buddha's arm, however you want to say it. So you have to first establish that the Buddha is a reliable being to take refuge in. And the only way you can establish that is by studying the Four Noble Truths, the first turning of the wheel of Dharma, the second turning of the wheel of Dharma, the third turning of the wheel of Dharma, and understanding, all of the points that the Buddha made, the four seals of that all compounded or conditioned phenomena are impermanent, and that all contaminated phenomena are suffering, and that all phenomena are empty and selfless, and that nirvana is peace. So it's by understanding that and believing that we would seek aid from Buddha. So we have this fear of suffering, which is the first cause of going for refuge, fear of this ditch that we're in, the prison of cyclic existence, the suffering of the hell, hungry ghost animal, human, demigods, and gods. We have this fear if we've studied it well. We've studied the 3 sufferings, the 6 sufferings, and the 8 sufferings well. We have this fear. And then we've established that the Buddha is reliable. So we have faith. So these are the 2 causes for going for refuge, going to the Buddha for protection. Now, and how does the Buddha protect us? The Buddha doesn't wash away the sins with water. The Buddha doesn't take away our sufferings with their hands. The Buddha doesn't transfer their realizations to us. The Buddha teaches us the truth of suchness. And this is how we are freed. So the refuge that we're seeking is in a reliable guide. So we're looking to be protected by a reliable guide. So when we go for refuge, we're going to that protection, meaning we're putting our faith in that being because we've established that they're a reliable person, and we are afraid of cyclic existence and the consequences of our karma and results, and the consequences of being ignorant. The consequences of being ignorant are another set of aggregates that we're forced into that are contaminated, that have to experience suffering, minimally the pervasive compounded suffering. So we first say, I go for refuge till I'm enlightened in the Buddhas. So we've established why. The Buddhas are the reliable guide. The Buddhas are beings who have these bodies, who have the Dharmakaya, the Sambhukaya, the Nirmanakaya. So we've established that about a Buddha. The Buddha has these excellent qualities of body, speech, mind, and enlightened activities when we read the Langritamba. So we establish the Buddha as a reliable person to go for refuge, as an appropriate person to go for refuge, as a solid person, because Buddha is not in cyclic existence. Buddha is an appropriate being to go for refuge to because they're free. So it says, I take refuge until I'm enlightened in the Buddhas. So we need to go to a reliable refuge. You know, if a tiger comes and a fawn runs to the protection of their mother, they're both going to be eaten. That fawn, you know, didn't have an appropriate refuge. But when we look in the case of a child, and even a small dog runs up sometimes, and the child's terrified, right, of this little dog. Maybe even a rabbit runs up. Some children are terrified, and they run to refuge to their parents. That's appropriate because the parent has love and compassion for the child and has the ability to shoot the dog. So that child picked an appropriate refuge. If we go for refuge to worldly deities who are stuck in cyclic existence, then we're the baby deer running to the mother deer for protection from a lion. We have to seek a being who is an appropriate refuge, that's a basis from which they have been freed. They have the love and compassion and power to help us. So we go for refuge to the Buddhas. We go for refuge to the Dharma. What is the Dharma? The Dharma, if we look at it technically, and that's the way we should look at it right now, is that the Dharma is the true cessations and true paths within the continuums of superiors. So we go for refuge to those true paths. We go for refuge to this idea of cessation. The Dharma, the cessation that we can achieve according to the Buddha, that's achieved through relying on these true paths. So we're moving towards, we're saying, this is what I believe will protect me. The true paths that have been presented by superior beings. And then I go for refuge to the Sangha. Sangha, technically speaking, are beings who have seen emptiness directly and are engaging in true paths. So you're going for refuge. It says the Sangha, the Buddha is like a doctor, the Dharma is like medicine, and the Sangha is like a nurse that helps you. You know, beings who are superior beings. And when we look at what those beings are, we can say the superior beings of the hearers, the solitary realizers, the Bodhisattva superiors, and the Buddha superiors, the Buddhas. So Sangha refers to all those beings when we look at an accurate presentation of the Sangha. If we look at nominal Sangha, we can say it's a group of 4 monastics who are together. We say Sangha a lot in the West, like, you know, students of Buddhism or Sangha, and maybe poetically, but technically, we wouldn't go for refuge to someone who wasn't an appropriate source of refuge. You know, then sometimes you hear, well, I'm taking refuge in your Buddha potential. Maybe a little weak, I think. Personally, my opinion, right? I want to take refuge in a superior. I want to take refuge in a being who has truth, who's seen emptiness directly. You become a superior when you have a direct perception of emptiness. I would like to rely on beings who have had that when I think of going for refuge. But when we see the monastics, we have to look at that as the representation of the Sangha. And we don't know who has seen emptiness and hasn't seen emptiness. That's another argument. So we can, in our minds, look at all our practitioners and friends as Sangha. But I'm someone it's hard for me to be so abstract. So I like to have something that's kind of solid to hold on to, that I know who I'm seeking protection from and know that they are reliable. So when we technically look at Buddha, Dharma, Sangha, that's the technical way we look at it. The Buddha is the being who is omniscient, who has crossed the 10th Bodhisattva ground, who has engaged in method and wisdom and achieved the state of complete Buddhahood. And the Dharma is the realization in the mind of superiors, of cessation and paths. And then the Sangha are those superiors. So it makes sense why we would look for protection from those 3 things when we know what they technically mean. Then it says, through the merit I create by, in this case, it says listening to the Dharma, but generally it says by practicing giving in the other perfections. That's Atisha's refuge prayer usually. It's changed here because we're listening to a teaching. So it's auspicious to say, from the merit I get from listening to this teaching, may I become a Buddha. But generally it says, through the merit I create by practicing giving and the other perfections. So in order to become a Buddha, we know you have to generate the mind that aspires to enlightenment, take a bodhisattva vow, and practice the 6 perfections. We're learning that in the class that we're taking right now, Bodhicitta class. We're learning that that's the process. So it says, through doing what we've been learning about, practicing giving and the other perfections that come about through wanting to become a Buddha for the sake of sentient beings. So then for the sake of sentient beings, you work towards the perfection of generosity, the perfection of ethics, the perfection of patience, the perfection of effort, the perfection of concentration, and the perfection of wisdom. And the first 5 perfections, it says in the Lamp for the Path to Enlightenment, fall under method. And the last perfection falls under wisdom. And we know that it's necessary to have a union of method and wisdom in order to become a Buddha. So we see how the 6 perfections allow for that union of method and wisdom. And in Chandrakirti's text, it says, the great goose flies over the ocean of cyclic existence with the 2 wings of conventional and ultimate, or method and wisdom, in order to get to the other side. So we know that we need this union of method and wisdom, and we find that also represented in Atisha's text in the same way, in order to become a Buddha. So this prayer says that, and it says, I'm going for refuge to the Buddha, the Dharma, and the Sangha. I'm practicing the 6 perfections. Why am I doing this? I'm doing this in order to become a Buddha for the sake of all sentient beings. So we have the aspiring bodhicitta, aspirational bodhicitta, placed within this prayer, and that's what makes it the prayer of refuge and bodhicitta, the prayer, the aspiring bodhicitta and refuge prayer. With that short, very, very kind of simple explanation of refuge and bodhicitta, please repeat after me. And I'll do the practicing giving and the other perfections, and then we can just, let's do it that way, because that's how it was explained. I take refuge until I am enlightened in the Buddhas, the Dharma, and the Sangha. Through the merit I create by practicing giving and the other perfections, may I attain Buddhahood for the sake of all sentient beings. I take refuge until I am enlightened in the Buddhas, the Dharma, and the Sangha. Through the merit I create by practicing giving and the other perfections, may I attain Buddhahood for the sake of all sentient beings. I take refuge until I am enlightened in the Buddhas, the Dharma, and the Sangha. Through the merit I create by practicing giving and the other perfections, may I attain Buddhahood for the sake of all sentient beings. So it's, I take refuge until I'm enlightened in the Buddhas, the Dharma, and the Sangha. Through the merit I create by practicing giving and the other perfections, may I attain Buddhahood for the sake of all sentient beings. So that's how we'll start class this evening. So that's the refuge prayer. And last week, we left off on the 7-point cause and effect for realizing the mind that aspires to enlightenment. I'd like to get into that. Just let's go over the outline once. I won't read through all the parts, but let's just go over the outline so we know it surely. So we know what we're talking about and thinking about when we're going over bodhicitta. We're not just guessing at it. We're not kind of knowing it, kind of meditating on it, because kind of makes kind of results. So let's get the real thing, because we're putting in this time and energy. We might as well put it in for something that's going to work, as Rinpoche would say many times. So bodhicitta is in Panchen Sonandrapa's General Meaning of Perfection, the section on mind generation, awakening mind. Mahayana mind generation has 5 parts. Base, so what kind of physical and mental base would be necessary in order to get the first arisal of aspiring bodhicitta and engaged bodhicitta. So we learned that. You can go back in the tapes. Very, very clear. No complication or ambiguity. the points are made very clearly on the previous tapes, previous classes about what that means. The causes of bodhicitta. That's where we've arrived at. We had general causes. We've gone over those general causes. General causes had causes, conditions, and powers. And then we got into kind of the specific causes that would bring about the mind that aspires to enlightenment. And in the text, it says specific root causes. So in that section, we find the specific root causes for generating the mind that aspires to enlightenment are two. One passed down from Buddha Shakyamuni to Lord Maitreya to Lord Sangha, and eventually to Lord Atisha, which was called the 7-point cause and effect for realizing the mind that aspires to enlightenment. And then also we find the practice of equalizing and exchanging self with others. It was passed down from Buddha Shakyamuni to Manjushri to Nagarjuna, Shantideva, and eventually down to Lord Atisha as well. And what's so amazing about the lineage that we study, and what's so amazing about Lama Tsongkhapa and the Kadampa lineage that Lord Atisha started and Dron Tompa started, the 3 Kadampa lineages, is that these lineages were able to take the lineage of the extensive deeds passed down from Buddha Shakyamuni to Maitreya to Asanga to Atisha, and the profound view lineage passed down from Buddha Shakyamuni to Manjushri to Nagarjuna to Aryadeva, Chandrakirti, Shantideva, etc. to Atisha. And then Atisha took all these lineages and combined them and then added the tantric lineage of blessings. It was passed down from Lord Vajradhara, who was really Buddha Shakyamuni in his tantric form, passing it down to Tilo and Naru and to the various great tantric adepts, eventually leading to Lord Atisha. And then Lord Atisha putting all of these lineages into one very beautiful package of practice. So we're so fortunate that then that was passed down to the Kadampa lineages, and then Lama Tsongkhapa caught in his golden hands all of this information and then just churned it and made it into beautiful, beautiful instructions that were already so pure, and then just put ornaments all over those pure instructions to make them so beautiful and make them so understandable that anybody who just was able to gaze on them would just be mesmerized by their beauty. So I really, really just rejoice in this lineage that we are able to learn from, because it's so beautiful. And when you start to analyze it and you start to study it and you start to get an incontrovertible kind of faith in it, when your refuge becomes incontrovertible because of the studies into this information, then you'll look at it and tears will come to your eyes at times when you're reading it, because it's so powerful and you won't be able to help it. You won't be able to stop those tears falling from your eyes, and it won't be out of weakness. It will just be out of this just great admiration and gratitude for the chance to be able to see this information. It's just so amazing. I was listening to the teaching I was taking from the Venerable Geshe Dorje Damdu, and he was saying, just think about it. Think about how wonderful this opportunity is. Get in a plane, get over a major city, look out the window, see all those lights on. You see, I don't know how many, millions of beings, right? Not even just not counting animals, that are in those apartments, in those houses, in those places with all those lights. So look at all that expansive beings you have below you. And then think to yourself, how many of them have heard the word bodhicitta? How many of them have the opportunity to hear the truth tonight, tomorrow, next year? And then really, really, really rejoice in this opportunity from the very, very depths of your heart. Kunu Lama, who was one of the Dalai Lama's teachers on bodhicitta, he was considered a bodhisattva. He was from Kannur, he was Indian, and he studied in Tibet, studied in India, studied in Sanskrit, great poet, amazing bodhisattva, and he helped His Holiness the Dalai Lama to understand the Shantideva's Guide to the Bodhisattva's Way of Life. And he wrote something, Ocean as Vast. I'm very sorry, I don't know the exact name of it right here in English, but he wrote a text that I will get you the name of. And it's not really a text that he wrote, it's a diary. And every day he wrote down a stanza. It's called Vast as the Heavens, Deep as the Sea, Verses in Praise of Bodhicitta by Kunu Lama. So it's this text. And basically every day he wrote down something about Bodhicitta, a stanza, and it's basically a year's diary of a bodhisattva, what they thought, what stanza they thought they wrote down that day. And he was one of His Holiness's teachers. And in the 70s, a group of Westerners visited Kunu Lama. And they came to him, and it sounds like they were wealthy. And they came to his room, and they said, "Oh, it's so wonderful. We're able to meet you. We've heard so much about you. Is there anything we can give you? Is there anything that you need?" And Kunu Lama looked very squarely at them and said, "I don't need anything. I have Bodhicitta." And when we learn about Bodhicitta, we see that Bodhicitta turns everything into gold, turns all of your actions, even when you're distracted, according to Shantideva, or sleeping, into virtue that causes Buddhahood, that causes infinite happiness. You can't buy that with money. Infinite happiness. Bodhicitta is the only thing that can cause that. So Kunu Lama said, "I don't need anything. I have Bodhicitta." And then the next day, he sent a rupee to every single one of the Westerners to their hotel room. He had one of his attendants bring 1 rupee and give it to each of them, just as even a seal that he was serious. And you see that these beings relish bodhicitta and what it does to them. What a group of people who probably had a lot of money and stuff, had this blown away, this experience that was written about, because this teacher just had bodhicitta, cared about others more than himself. We talked about the Dalai Lama and the Dalai Lama's impartiality to all beings, and that it just comes out of him. Tonight, there's a long life ceremony for him about a half hour after the teaching. You can just put it on and it'll come on. And I really, anytime the Dalai Lama is teaching live, if you can, listen to it. If you can't live, listen to it later, but usually then it's next week, and then I'll catch the next one. It's good if you can really make a commitment to listen to them live, or say tomorrow at this time, I will listen to it, because His Holiness is giving incredible teachings. And when we can engage and kind of participate in a long life ceremony for him, it's wonderful. So we have this opportunity to ourselves in this lifetime realize this mind that we're talking about. This isn't some thing we can't realize. I mean, Pabunko Rinpoche in Liberation in the Palm of Your Hand says it's you're very capable of realizing it in this lifetime. It's not like seeing emptiness directly. It's not as difficult for that to happen, according to the Lam Rim texts, as getting this bodhicitta mind. It really just takes familiarization with it. It takes familiarization first, as we said, if we're looking at how we would achieve bodhicitta. And now we're going to start looking again at the 7-point cause and effect for achieving the mind that aspires to enlightenment right now. It would first need to have this equal mind. You'd have to have a foundation for bodhicitta occur. It couldn't just occur out of my mind, the way my mind works, because I don't like some people at times, and I really, really like others way too much at times. And strangers, I just kind of walk by and don't really think about at times. But we learned that grasping at some, having aversion towards others, and just shucking off others isn't a ground that can grow bodhicitta. So Lama Tsongkhapa, Kamala Shila in the stages of meditation, Lama Tsongkhapa in the great treatise on the stage of the path to enlightenment, citing Kamala Shila and other masters, says that we first have to start with this ground of equanimity, where we gain this impartiality towards all beings, towards our friends, towards our enemies, and towards our neutrals. And it says that we need to kind of, do it in a specific fashion, so that we can, see our reactions. We see how when we think of a stranger, how we kind of mentally react. We see how when we think of someone we love, we mentally react, or love, and we think of somebody that we hate and how we mentally react. And then we use all of the different meditations that we've mentioned already, that since beginningless time, we've had every relationship with these beings. Our friends have been our enemies have been our friends, strangers have been both of those things. And we start to get an equal ability within our mind to want to benefit them, that we could. We're not benefiting them yet. We could. We have a mind that could, and that wouldn't have biased, wouldn't run towards someone we knew and cared about quicker than we would run to someone that's a stranger and that's someone that is an enemy. So we start to really, really work, and we establish first that we have this beginningless continuum, a beginningless continuum that isn't material. It's not something that is findable, like this, our body, our bones, our form, all of these things that this kind of body that houses our kind of subtle consciousness. This can all be measured. We can first, as Geshe Damdu is giving me now in education and some science stuff, we first can look at it in terms of atoms, these physical things. Our mind, we can't find those. And then protons, neutrons, electrons, we can't find those when we try to measure consciousness or look at consciousness. So we see that this body and the consciousness that it houses are two separate entities, and that when this body dies, we still have this thing. The elements and so forth turn into other things. They move on, right? We know that they're always changing. They're always in the nature of change. Because there's heat, there's movement, there's change going on as these aggregates are shucked off. But this consciousness becomes another story. And we see that this consciousness is caused by a previous consciousness, caused by a previous consciousness. And that's how we begin to establish this beginningless continuum of consciousness that has had beginningless lives and beginningless relationships with all sentient beings. And we look at the varieties of karmas we create and the varieties of karmas that other sentient beings create, and we see that the linkages are there's just so many possibilities. When you put numbers in a machine and you start having them pop up, imagine if you had infinite numbers with infinite possibilities, a number we couldn't measure of possibilities popping up, right? Imagine that infinite, since beginningless time, there's this kind of things popping up. Imagine the variables. And the Buddha, who is omniscient, said that, we have, murdered everyone and took care of them like our closest child. We have to begin to just be more realistic with this, friends, enemies, and neutrals. So we won't get into too much detail about that tonight because we went over it already, but I think it's always important to establish beginningless lives, show how consciousness is caused by consciousness, not from something that's a dissimilar class, as Dharmakirti says in the Pramanavartika Karika. It comes from a similar class. It turns into a similar class. Consciousness, it becomes, this moment's consciousness will become the next moment's, will be what causes the next moment's consciousness. So we look at this, our consciousness will go on and has always, been beginninglessly. And we establish that, in this case, for the purpose of establishing these varying relationships we've had with sentient beings. So then we begin with this first idea we went over last time, establishing that all sentient beings are our mother. And when we think about this, I've been reading a lot about this, and I've actually been meditating on this. We're thinking about ourselves as a child that's vulnerable, that has no ability to protect ourselves. And this all sentient beings have been our protector, have cared for us, have put our needs before theirs at times. When we were, maybe a dog's puppy, maybe the mother dog didn't have enough food, but they let themselves starve and gave all, the milk and became very skinny for the sake of the pup. Our mothers carried us in their womb when we needed carrying and, fed us, with the food that they fed themselves. And then when we came out, we were helpless. We couldn't do anything for ourselves. Somebody intervened. If somebody didn't intervene and take care of us when we were so helpless, we wouldn't have been able to make it. They made sure we had food to eat. They made sure we had the things that we needed because they had affection for us so that we survived. So it's that state of seeing, I'm your child, not thinking like, later on as we become more and more mature. Of course, the Lamrim talks about, how our mother helped us, get us through schooling and so forth. But it's very easy as we become less helpless to take an image on of this mother that we don't really necessarily need so much. So it's really important for us when we establish this, we're establishing it as this helpless being that needed the love of another. And that other gave that love, gave that aid to us in order for us to not die, basically, in order for us to be able to study Buddhism, in order to be a Mahayanist eventually, in order to get Bodhicitta. So when we think of it in those terms, and we meditate on this over and over and over again, it says in Kamala Shila's text, and it says in the Lamrim Chemo, that we have to use real beings for this. We can't use an abstract idea of sentient being. We have to use real beings. And we start with our actual mothers or whoever we're putting kin, whoever we can find that closest feeling for, right? That was able to help us when we were helpless, to give us aid when we were helpless. And it's when we start to trace that back, we see that every being at one point in time or another cared for us in that very, very loving and nurturing way. It was very nurturing, gave us food, gave us milk, and nurtured us. So when we start to establish that, then we start to look at the types of beings that did it. We begin with friends, and then we think about neutrals. And then we think about enemies to see if our equanimity is still there. And then we shrink it if we have to. And then we try to make it bigger. And then we can eventually get to that point where we are thinking about all sentient beings. And in the Lamrim, it says that when we've realized this first step, we'll encounter an ant and spontaneously, without analysis, say, I'm your child. I was your child. You were so kind to me. Look at that ant as your mother. Say, I'm your child. Because when we look at beginningless lives, this consciousness is beginningless. They are our mothers. Kindness done a month ago is kindness still today. Kindness done a lifetime ago is still kindness today. Mother a lifetime ago is still mother, because it's the same continuum. It's the same continuum that's being thrust into bodies and then shucking bodies off, or form or formless bodies, whatever, in the forms of different forms of cyclic existence that is occurring. So if we have realized this first step, this is just the first step of trying to become affectionate towards beings, then we start to see them as our mothers. We start to be able to look at an ant and say that I'm your child, and believe it spontaneously. That's the level of realization. That's why when the Dalai Lama walks up to everyone and they all think, oh, he's coming to me, he's looking at me, because he's looking at everyone. He has affection for everyone. He has this unbelievable caring that takes place because of this maturity, because of these meditations. So the Dalai Lama sees an ant and says, I'm your child. And that's why he reacts like that to beings. So the next thing is you remember their kindness. So now you've seen, oh, I'm your child. You're looking at an ant. This next meditation starts to kind of make your affection become even stronger, because you're starting to think about what those beings have done for you, all the kindness that they've showed, all the wonderful things they've done, remembering that kindness. You're doing that a little bit when you're establishing them as mother, but this next step is really reinforcing it, why you should have affection for this being. Because if they were just, weren't kind, or there wasn't anything you could establish, if you're just naming them as mother, or as kin, or as closest one, then that name wouldn't really have much power if there wasn't reasoning for you to have affection for them. So you start to remember their kindness, think about the kind things that they've done over and over and over again. And then when you realize this, now you look at a being and you say, oh, I'm your child. You've been so kind to me. An ant. Immediately, spontaneously, you think about that. You've been so kind to me without any analysis. Just spontaneously, you've been so kind to me. And then the next step is wishing to repay their kindness. And here, what would be the ultimate way that we could repay their kindness? We start to think, oh, wish I could do something for this being who's been so kind to me. What could I do? How could I repay this? I'm your child. You've nurtured me. You've loved me. Friend, enemy, neutral. In that order again, meditating, remembering their kindness, friend, enemy, and neutral. Wishing to repay their kindness, friend, enemy, and neutral. I want to do something for you. I want to repay this kindness somehow. So now you've established this affection for beings that's necessary in order for you to want them to be happy. When you think of an enemy, the first thing you think of isn't for them to be happy. So you have to mature to that point where you have affection for your friends, for your enemies, for your neutrals. Those labels come off and it becomes all sentient beings. Friends, enemies, and neutrals label comes off, becomes all sentient beings that I have affection for. I'm equally willing to benefit. They've all been my mothers. They've been so kind to me. I want to repay their kindness. I have affection for them, my friends, enemies, and neutrals, who I now call all sentient beings because of this impartiality. I don't want to help one of them more. I don't want to definitely not help one of them. And I don't want to help one of them less, because a stranger that we walk by is the ant that we are the child of. So this is so important. When you start to analyze the 7-point cause and effect using the texts, and not just using one little one, running through it and getting kind of a summary of the points and then meditating aimlessly on it. Using Dharmakirti's beginningless lives, beginningless consciousness, using the fact that body and consciousness are two separate things, using the idea that consciousness has been housed and bodies have been shucked. Different realms have been realized and actualized. We see the animals, we see the bugs, we see the maggots, we see the deer, right? We see the humans. We see even the varying degrees of awfulness in the human realm. We needn't look very far. We see all of this. So it's really, really important that we broaden our understanding of these subjects, because bodhicitta is this immeasurable mind. When we talk about the four immeasurables, it's immeasurable because when we have immeasurable love, immeasurable compassion, what's this word immeasurable? It's immeasurable because the object of observation is something that we can't count in our little brains, and that's sentient beings. The object of observation for our immeasurable love is all sentient beings, so it's not measurable, that love. Our compassion isn't measurable because the object of it is all sentient beings that we can't measure in our little minds. So that's the kind of mind that we're trying to have occur. So we have to start with real beings, make it bigger, and broaden it to the point that we are impenetrable in terms of attachment and aversion towards beings. We can't be penetrated in our reactions towards those beings by our attachment and our aversion and our just kind of ignorance of shucking them off, not caring about strangers. We cannot be led around by that. We have to achieve this impartiality and an equal desire to benefit and affection for all those types of beings. If we want to have a love for beings that's beyond measure, because those beings that the love is focused on are beyond measure. So it's this humongous mind state that we're trying to cultivate. And it's going to take quite a bit in order to do that. Because we have a self-cherishing attitude that's like a chronic disease, as they say, the chronic disease of the self-cherishing attitude. Everything that's bad that's ever happened, according to Shantideva's text, the Guide to the Bodhisattva's Way of Life, is from it. Everything that's good that ever happens or will happen is from cherishing other beings. The Buddhas and Bodhisattvas cherish others, ordinary beings cherish themselves. Look at the difference. They have everything good. We have some okay things sometimes. The Buddhas and Bodhisattvas are aiming towards infinite happiness and have a way to get there, a definite way to get there. So I think basically it says, I have difficulty seeing a place wherein you have not been born, gone to or died in the distant past. I have difficulty seeing any person in the distant past who has not been your father, mother, aunt, sister, uncle, master, abbot, guru, or someone like a guru. That's from a Sangha's levels of yogic deeds. It says, moreover, all beings have not only previously been your mothers, but will also be your mothers in the future, a limitless number of times. Reflect upon this and become convinced that all beings have been your mothers. Once you develop the conviction, you will then easily remember their kindness and so forth. If you do not develop it, you'll have no basis for remembering their kindness. So like we said, you have to do these things step by step. Establish that they have been our mothers, all sentient beings. And then remember their kindness. You have to have a basis to think about. The basis is all sentient beings that have been our mothers. Then we can think about what they did. We remember their kindness. Then we can think about repaying their kindness. And this is how we develop this first part, which is called affection. The next part is called the development of an attitude of being intent on others' welfare. And we won't get into that tonight, but I thought that there was something interesting to read. It's actually jumping ahead, but it has to do with what I'm talking about. So it's jumping ahead to the cultivation of compassion. It's a couple it's a paragraph down, and it says, it's in the great Lama Tsongkhapa's great treatise on the stages of the path to enlightenment. It says, Kamala Shila, following the discourses on knowledge, set out this way of graduating gradually cultivating impartiality, love, and compassion while distinguishing specific objects of meditation. So the object is, for instance, of love is, of compassion is living beings who experience misery through any of the three kinds of suffering. The suffering of change, suffering of suffering, and pervasive compounded suffering. Okay, so Kamala Shila says there's got to be a specific object of meditation. It is an extremely important point. If you train in these attitudes of impartiality, love, and compassion without distinguishing and taking up specific objects of meditation, but only using a general object from the outset, you will just seem to generate these attitudes. So if you're not using real beings, you may seem to be generating them, but if you're not using someone you have attachment for or aversion for, you're not going to generate real impartiality because you aren't testing it. You're creating sentient beings that are in outer space that you like or that you don't like too much, right? The perfect sentient beings. So you're not doing that. You're trying to get attitude towards friends, enemies, and neutrals. Then when you try to apply them to specific individuals, if you've done it generally, if you're just meditating on sentient beings that are on Pluto, that fit into the perfect way of the perfect sentient being to meditate on, you will not be able to actually generate these attitudes towards anyone, it says. So let me read it again. It's an extremely important point. If you train in these attitudes of impartiality, love, and compassion without distinguishing and taking up specific objects of meditation, but only using a general object from the outset, you will just seem to generate these attitudes. Then when you try to apply them to specific individuals, you will not be able to actually generate these attitudes towards anyone, not towards a friend, not towards an enemy, or towards a neutral. Because sentient beings on Pluto, right, that you're pretending you equally will benefit isn't a stranger. At this point, you're not thinking you'd equally run to the aid of a stranger as you would to your mother or your closest kin, whoever you care the most about. Two of them were standing there, you'd run. Most of us who aren't bodhisattvas, right, would run to the one that they wanted to help. And if an enemy or the one we love is both struggling, we know where we would run. But once you have a transformative experience towards an individual in your meditative practice, as explained previously, so when we're developing impartiality, once we have a meditative experience with a stranger, where we would be equally ready to help them, you may then gradually increase the number of individuals you visualize within your meditation. Finally, take all beings in general as your object of meditation. When you sustain this practice in meditation, you will generate these attitudes correctly, whether you're dealing with individuals or a group. Hold on one sec. How do I, last opportunity? Okay. And okay, so I have something on my screen, but I don't think that anyone else can see it. I postponed it multiple times and now it won't postpone it anymore. So it's when you spontaneously feel this that you know it's occurred. Let's stop there. I don't want to go over too much because we want to get to His Holiness teachings, those who can. But please, please, please look at this in terms of cause and effect always. Make sure that you're generating the causes that actually make the effect happen. So we have to be really specific if we want to do that. If we want chocolate milk, we can't put vanilla with milk. We'll get vanilla milk. Like, why do we get vanilla milk? Well, you didn't, if you wanted chocolate milk, you should have put chocolate. And then you can be really specific. Like, do you want, what brand of chocolate milk do you want it to make? Do you want it to be homemade or a mix, right? You got to get really specific with what result you want, and then put all the ingredients together. We believe in this already. Everyone who reads a recipe has faith in cause and effect. You have faith that you're going to put all this work in, you're going to put all these ingredients together, you're going to wait all this time, and then there's going to be food that's delicious, worthy of eating, that others will enjoy, right? You already have faith in this process. You don't think that you're going to be able to put, the cream sauce ingredients together to get a marinara sauce. You need these things, you need tomatoes, unless it's pink, you don't need half and half or cream, you just need the tomatoes and the stuff to make it a marinara sauce, right? You need to be very specific what exactly you're trying to make with a recipe. So why wouldn't it be the same if we're trying to make something that's so much more complex that like most people could follow through a recipe, and that like a very minute number of sentient beings, right, have the aptitude at this very point in time to look at these steps the way that we do, the opportunity to look at these steps the way that we do, and the texts with the clear, concise stages in them without error. So we're so fortunate. So I just beg all of you not to be satisfied with impartial instructions. Impartial instructions give you impartial realizations. Impartial realizations aren't what we're going for. Well, we almost did it. I almost got rid of suffering. That's not good. You still have suffering. Didn't work. Almost isn't good enough. If you want the end, almost isn't good enough. So don't almost do everything. Impartiality gets you impartial. Partial things get you partial results. We're not looking for something partial. We're looking for something complete. So anyway, does anybody have any questions before we do some prayers? Okay, so there's a prayer I'm adding. I'm adding a few prayers. I'm not sure exactly which ones they are yet, but this is definitely one of them. It's the Geshe Longritamba's 8 verses on training the mind. We'll read it at the end of every class from now on. I'll get it somehow up on the screen or get it to people, the specific translation. And also we'll add some other prayers. I'd like to do the aspirational bodhicitta vows every time before we start class within our prayers. So we'll look at that as well in the future. So the 8 verses on training the mind by Geshe Langritamba. This falls into the category of mind training text. This is 8 verses. He was a great master that showed us how to cherish others more than ourselves. That's the whole point of mind training, equalizing and exchanging self with others. It's to generate an attitude that wishes to cherish others that's as strong as the attitude we now have that is a chronic disease that cherishes ourselves. So here we'll read this because this helps. 8 verses on training the mind by Geshe Longritamba. With the determination to accomplish the highest welfare of all sentient beings who surpass even a wish-granting jewel, I will learn to hold them supremely dear. Whenever I associate with others, I will learn to think of myself as the lowest amongst all and respectively hold others to be supreme from the very depths of my heart. In all actions, I will learn to search into my mind, and as soon as a disturbing emotion arises endangering myself and others, I will firmly face and avert it. I will learn to cherish ill-natured beings and those oppressed by strong misdeeds and sufferings as if I had found a precious treasure difficult to find. When others out of jealousy treat me badly with abuse, slander, and so on, I will learn to take all loss and offer victory to them. When the one whom I benefited with great hope unreasonably hurts me very badly, I will learn to view that person as an excellent spiritual guide. In short, I will learn to offer to everyone without exception all help and happiness directly and indirectly, and respectively take upon myself all the harm and suffering of my mothers. I will learn to keep all these practices undefiled by the stains of the 8 worldly concerns, and by understanding all phenomena as like an illusion, be released from the bondage of attachment. So now we'll do the concluding mandala offering and dedication prayer. Summa, the fundamental ground is scented with incense and strewn with flowers, adorned with Mount Meru, the 4 continents, the sun and the moon. I imagine this as a Buddha land and offer it. May all sentient beings enjoy this pure realm. I dedicate whatever virtues I have collected for the benefit of the teachings and of all sentient beings, and in particular for the essential teachings of Venerable Lozandrapa to shine forever. I send forth this jeweled mandala to you, precious Guru. I dedicate all this virtue to emulate the knowledge of the hero Manjushri and likewise Samanta Bhadra as well. With whatever dedication is praised as supreme by all the conquerors who traverse the 3 times, I also dedicate all my roots of virtue for the sake of auspicious deeds. In that pure land surrounded by snowy mountains, you are the source of all benefit and happiness. All powerful Avalokiteshvara Tenzin Jatsu, may you stay until samsara's end. I pray that we may in all of our lives never be separated from Tensor Geshe Wanda. In whatever form he chooses or she chooses to appear to us, being emanated from the Dharmakaya out of great love and compassion, and omniscience that knows everything that we need, may we always meet with that embodiment, whether it is in our realm where we can see the enjoyment body, or when we are Arya Bodhisattvas, may we meet with that being in the Sambhogakaya form. May we generate all the causes and conditions that are necessary to keep that relationship as strong as a diamond. Thank you very much, everyone. And let's try to put these teachings into practice. Let's try, we have another teaching on Sunday. Let's try to see if we can move a little bit closer towards Bodhicitta between now and then. And let's try, most of all, to be better human beings every hour if we can. You know, how wonderful it could be, and how wonderfully affected everyone around us would be if we were a little bit better every day. So thank you, all of you, for listening. And until next time, if there is a next time, because we have the karma to meet again, I say have a wonderful, wonderful night.